say, and we've talked about it, is that we need to remove this us versus them mindset to begin with. And then it won't become an issue of officer safety or community safety. It becomes an issue of contact safety. You know, it becomes an issue of everybody being able to go home, you know, at the end of this, because again, I ask deputies, hey, where do you live? And when they tell me they live in, let's just say Anaheim, and they say, okay, Anaheim has its own police department, so when you're at home, who are you? Are you us versus them? And they look at me like they don't understand what I'm saying. I said, well, you have this mentality that we are at war with them meaning the community. So when you're at home in your quote unquote community, who are you? And you know, I think it takes more conversations like that to really get them to put it in perspective and to start seeing things from a different view and seeing how they would want their family to be treated if they're stopped, how they would want their family to be treated, you know, if they're a victim of a crime or even suspected of anything. You know, and it really just comes down to that respect, dignity, and compassion piece.
And that actually brings us into our next subject, which is recruiting and hiring. And like you said, a lot, you know, they live out of the area and they work in the inner city or in communities that they weren't born and raised in. So tell us well, I'll just see who has a question on that recruiting and hiring, because it's dear to my heart. My son is also a sheriff, and he was born in LA, raised in Compton and Bellflower, and he had to jump through hoops to become an officer, even though he has a master's degree. And so let's go into recruiting and hiring. I don't know if anyone has a question about that, but it's, again, very dear to my heart. What changes do you see happening when it comes to recruiting and hiring, and how can we get these young people from our communities involved? I know when I was a child, we had the Compton, what was that, the cadets or something, where the kids from the community would go and sit in a classroom and learn. Explorers, that's right. Do they still have those kind of programs going? Yes. And so I'll ask that question first, and then if anyone else has a question on recruiting and hiring, we'll go from there.
Yes, recruiting and hiring is a very, very high priority for me once I get in office. You know, to try to put this mildly, it's deliberate, it's intentional that people of color are not hired, you know, at a rate that other races and demographics are. And you know, being the unit commander of audit and accountability, we did a review many years ago, well, back in 2018, on the hiring and background process. And typically, where our audits were public, what we found out in the background process was something that at the time the administration did not make this one public. They pretty much drawered it, to be honest with you. It's deliberate. Be honest with you, blacks have a much higher standard to meet in order to get hired. They are disqualified at a much higher rate for things that are very, very minor. And I'll speak to this. You know, our own son was applying for the police department, for the sheriff's department, and he was really applying for a developmental position, either as a security officer or as a custody assistant. And he went through the entire background process, and he had his polygraph in October, and I don't remember what year, I think it was 2018. He has polygraph in October of 2018. And they asked him a question, had he been around any drug use? And he said yes. He said when he was at a party in September, and mind you, his birthday was in September, he turned 21. He was at a party, and some of his friends were smoking marijuana. Through this polygraph, they asked him if he smoked the marijuana while he was there, and he said no. And they verified that his answer was correct. He did not have any deception in that answer. He was then later disqualified from being hired, and the reason is because he was at this party where his friends smoked marijuana. And it's very subjective. The background investigator determined that he should have left the party. Now, this is why it's important to remember that it's September of 2018, because in January of 2018, marijuana was legalized. So here he is at a party with adults, 21 and over, participating in illegal activity, and he's disqualified. Why that's important is because, as we said, my wife works for the department, I work for the department. For the most part, everything this kid has ever had, every ounce of food that he's eaten, every piece of clothing that he's wore came from police department, came from law enforcement. That paycheck is what fed him. And when I talked to him about it and he had an opportunity to appeal it, his attitude was, why would I even want to work for this agency if that's how they're going to treat people? And I couldn't argue with him. I couldn't argue with him at all. So when we look at, trying to hire from the community, and we look at trying to hire young blacks, first of all, police departments, law enforcement, sheriff departments are a big turnoff right now. We know that. We see that in the news all day, every day. I think it's important to let them know that, number one, they need to be the change from within. They need to get in on those departments, even though they're thinking it's not something that they want to do. Secondly, I think that a lot of young, black men and women, they figure they're not going to get hired anyway, so why even waste their time going through the process? So we need to change that. Our recruiting needs to be specific. We need to increase our numbers. It needs to be deliberate, and that is something that I will do. And the hiring standards definitely need to not be lessened, but be changed so that, it gives opportunities for all people and not just a select few.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. I grew up in Maryland and D.C., so I saw, I guess it's different type of police in different places depending upon what things are. But I saw, some of my friends that went into law enforcement, and I looked at it as an honorable position. It's a tough job, but an honorable job. And we had some bad situations because my family was involved in drug and alcohol abuse as I grew up. And so there was a lot of issues with that. But from a representation or a stigma standpoint, a lot of the kids from my community had a different thought process on police officers. So how do you overcome that stigma to help more people want to come into the profession?
I think first thing we do is we have to get out there and get in those communities and show them people like myself, show them people like, Cece, who was born and raised in Compton, show them people like some of the positive influences, Tyler, and bring them to these communities. A lot of times they don't see us and they don't know that we're there. And when they do see us, it's in such a few number. Honestly, if I were to look at it today, I don't know if I would feel comfortable going into an organization where I look like, I'm used to it now. I'm used to being one of the only ones in the room, most of the time. I think it's important to do specific recruiting. And again, I'll tell you another story. A lieutenant on our department, a black woman, was put into recruitment, and this was just within the last, I think, a year and a half or 2 years. And they asked her to set up an office at the Star Center, which is in Whittier. And they asked her to set up an office for recruitment. And her request was, well, I'd like to set up an office at the Ladera Center. There's a substation there that hasn't been used in a couple of years. I'd like to set up an office and recruit there. And she was blatantly told, we don't need to recruit from that area. We have enough. So when I say it's deliberate, it's deliberate. When I say it's intentional, it's intentional. And those are the things that are going to need to change, and those are the things that are going to change with the right leadership in the right position to push people into those communities and to make it a very deliberate and relevant effort at recruiting.
So to piggyback on that a little bit, I know based on numbers, we got about 9,000 men and women that are part of the LA Sheriff's Department. 6% of those are black. And so when you talk about recruiting, when you talk about some of the intentionality with not recruiting from some areas, what is it that you can implement as the chief to diversify some of the hiring process? Is a hiring process based on a panel, or is it based on a one-to-one interview? How is it that change can be made? Because a lot of times when we talk about community policing, yeah, it's good for a young man to see someone as a police officer that looks like him. It's no different than in education. It does well for a young man to see a male teacher teaching. So what is it that you can implement and make it very, pretty much make it a hard sell, that there is diversity during the hiring process so that we can increase that number from 6% to double that, maybe after your first year, to get men and women of color, in particular, those who are policing in black and brown neighborhoods, to be hired?
Yeah, it's a very good question. If you notice, I think every 4 years, every election, I think every sheriff that I've ever remembered has said they are going to hire more blacks for the community. And yet and still, we still seem to hover around this 6 to 8%. I honestly haven't seen it yet. The thing to remember is that when I am the sheriff, I'll be the one that says who we're hiring and who we're not. And when I am the sheriff, I'll be the ones appointing the people to do the backgrounds, appointing the people to sit on the panel, appointing the lieutenants and the sergeants that are going to go in there and they're going to absolutely execute with the standards that I set. Other than that, they'll be held accountable. You know, I just want to say that here's the kind of things that we have and we look at. And when you look at candidate A versus candidate B, and these are these panels, and this is part of this process that I reviewed. You look at candidate A, and let's just say candidate A grew up in a middle-class family in Orange County, in the Valley somewhere, both parents at home working, and goes to high school. He or she does everything that they're supposed to do. They go on to go to college. Parents are paying the tuition or paying the bills for the housing. You know, this person, the parent gives them a credit card to put in their name so that they can start building credit. They're working, but you know what? They have parent support. So if they don't work, if they don't like the job, they can quit if they so choose. You know, and they can have these big breaks. And then they go and buy a car. And when they go buy a car, the parent co-signs for them. And when the parent co-signs for them, you know, they're helping that young individual. So now this person goes and applies for the sheriff's department or in law enforcement, and they have great credit. They have a great background. You know, they finished college, they've gone through school, and they have a little bit of work history. Now let's look at candidate B, who grew up somewhere else. And let's just say that they grew up in a single-family home. And they maybe didn't go to the best high school, but they stayed out of trouble. They're doing everything that they're supposed to do. And now they're attending a local community college, Compton College, El Camino, South LA, one of these. And they're going to classes. And I just want to remind you that this is an actual incident that we had. This person is going to class, they're working, they're doing everything that they can to propel themselves forward. Their parent, their single parent, has their own business. And they have their own business is a food vendor. This single parent gets into a car accident and is injured, and all of her equipment is damaged. So now she has no income. She doesn't have sick time that she can rely on. She doesn't have vacation time or holiday time that she can continue to get her full paycheck. If she's not out there working, she's not getting paid. This other candidate, seeing what's going on, they go get a second job to help out with the family. As they get this second job, what starts to suffer a little bit? Some of their classes. So they drop some classes or they withdraw from a few. As things go on, now it becomes a time where they've got their own car. They've already tried to establish themselves, but now their younger brother or sister wants to go to prom. And this person makes sacrifices to help their younger brother or sister go to prom and pay for a dress and help contribute to the limousine. Their car note is late. You know, their car note is late and never gets repossessed, but they're making an effort to help their family, and they're also putting food on the table for their family. If you ask me, this candidate B is a much more responsible applicant than candidate A. They've been tested, they've had to deal with adversity, but candidate B gets disqualified. Candidate A, who's been leaning on mommy and daddy their whole life and really hasn't done anything by themselves, gets hired at 20 and a half and is given a badge and gun. Those are the things that will change. Those are the things that I will implement and say, no, we will evaluate the person and get to the story behind it and not be looking at a credit report or not be looking at a college transcript solely and by itself. And again, it's going to come down to putting those expectations and that mindset in place and just enforcing it.
Since we know the system is flawed, and like you said, your son, the situation he had to deal with, and so many other black folks and African Americans, they have to count the jelly beans before they're even considered, right? So what can we do as people, as folks to help once you're elected and even before you're elected? What can we do to get behind that system and make sure it's changed?
You know, that brings up a very good point, especially with the clergy that is here. You know, talk about it. You know, change comes about through dialogue. You know, we have to talk about it. We have to speak to our young men and women. We have to bring people in and put them in front of them and say, hey, this is a good career. This is something that you can be a part of. This is something where you can be the change from within. You know, we basically just have to let them know that the system is going to change and they're going to have a fair opportunity. And get them out there and have them come and test, have them come and recruit, have them come and talk to, you know, police officers, law enforcement officials, deputies. Bring myself in. If you have a group, any community, any organization, I don't care if it's the Rotary Club or the book club, you know, call me. I'll come and speak to them, you know, and I'll tell them, you know, you won't get rich being a police officer, but you can make a pretty good living and you can have a positive impact on society.
How can, one, I want to back up and say this. My brain is working slow because I'm thinking about the tacos outside. But the first thing is, so you mean to tell me that the whole issue of hiring, right, who gets hired, will be at your door?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let me clarify that. I won't be doing the backgrounds.
Okay. All right.
However, it's like with anything. You set an expectation. You tell them this is what I want to see, and this is what I'm looking for. And then you trust but verify. There's going to be a process in which, you know, I myself or very, very high-level trusted officials will go back and review some of these hiring things. You know, first thing I plan to do, honestly, is probably pull the last 500 or 600 disqualifications. You know, again, I was the unit commander for Audit and Accountability Bureau, and I know what they're capable of. They can probably go through 500 applications and see whether the disqualifications were valid or not in a matter of maybe 60 days at most. You know, so there's going to be some definite efforts, and again, that's one of my highest priorities.
And what would be your thought process as often, I remember when the present sheriff was coming through, getting ready to be elected, and, you know, churches became a hot spot and the clergy become a partnership that everybody wants to have. And then people get in office, and then we can't call y'all. My question is, and I'm smiling behind the mask, by the way. I don't have an attitude. I'm in a great mood. But I want to ask the question of how can, and I've asked this on several levels. I've asked it with Chief Moore. We're currently advocating for this that I'm about to ask you for. How realistic is it for us to ask that clergy, that gatekeepers of the city, that leaders of the community be a part of the hiring process?
Right.
Like, how realistic? We're being recorded right now. I love you, Brother Eric, with the love of the Lord. That's what we say in church. But I really want to know, if you were to get in, how realistic would it be that a Pastor Gregory Sanders or Pastor Nams can sit on some sort of a board? And I know it may not exist right now. I'm coming back later to deal with them Bill of Rights. I'm coming back. Yeah. And the union that's protecting the sheriffs. I'll be back in a second for that. But I want to know, in your opinion, if you got in, if tomorrow was your day one, how realistic would it be that you come back to Bishop Irvin and say, we're putting together a new board that we will review candidate A, B, C, D, Z, and then when we're done, you all will also look at them, and then our decision will be made together of who's going to patrol our streets. How realistic is that request?
Honestly, I think it's very realistic. One of the things that's a little off topic that I want to do, and again, not making any promises, but this is implementing additional community oversight at the level of each station and jail facility, whereas we have the county oversight, but I'd like to see people from the community have a little bit of oversight and input in complaint investigations and use of force investigations so that they can review those things and they could see how we come to our dispositions. They can see how we, determine whether force or a complaint was valid or not. So you bring up a very good point. And one thing I want to say is that I have a 24-point plan that I've been working on, and I'm at 24 now. I'm proud to say that 2 of the things that are on that list of 24, and I actually have it here with me tonight, came directly from the community. These are things that I go to the community and I ask them for input. I say, give me an idea on how you can be better served. And they've given me some ideas, and 2 of them are almost verbatim, the way that they suggest them will be implemented. So I'm going to ask you, would you be willing to put together that plan? And if you put it together, it'll go down on list number 25.
Oh, I will have it on your desk first of next week. Because no, I'm serious and I don't want to take up time, but in all truthfulness, because it leads into another question, but maybe we should set up a meeting, we could talk separate. Everyone knows how I am. But I think if you were to say you wanted to pastor a church, real quick, I think it sounds real dreamy to say, I'm going to go in that church and you know what, we about to change it because God is doing a new thing. But I think that those who have pastored would tell you, hold on for a second, because you got a deacon board, a trustee board, and you've got the elders of the church, you got the mother that's been the highest tithe payer. And so my question would be, eventually, we don't have to answer it now, but in all of the promises that we will hear tonight, when I say how realistic it is, the answer I'm looking for is, what will you have to fight through, rewrite, amend, change in order to really make that a reality? Because I am the one that, if you don't do what you said here, I will knock on your door. And I don't mean no disrespect. I don't, but and my generation is that generation, and so that's the reason why I was asking that. But I will definitely have that plan on your desk. Just give me your email. I'll have it by Tuesday.
All right, thank you.
And if I can add,
Oh,
one
go
thing
ahead,
that
Pastor
might help
Sanders.
and be a catalyst is that in Long Beach, we have that model. There is not a new hiring process that does not include a community leader, and it's primarily faith-based with a sworn, and we can X an individual out at the beginning of the interview. He doesn't even get to background. And so it has to happen before even background. At the time they're being interviewed, there's not an interviewing process in Long Beach if we don't sit at the table with a sworn and us, and we can disqualify an interviewee before they even get to background. So that there's models that can help, and I think that has to happen, because it has to be community engagement. We introduce ourselves, our pastors introduce ourselves to a new class, class. We go inside the class and introduce ourselves, and that is the message. You will see us in the community. And so even that, bringing pastors or clergy or community leaders or gatekeepers into the actual class while they're in the academy has benefits too. So definitely I'd love to see that in the plan as well.
Sounds like we don't need to recreate the wheel. It's already there.
Well, one version of it might have to be a little different for this particular, but it has to, I think that's paramount to moving the needle forward. I agree.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Anyone else have any questions on recruiting and hiring? No? Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to the citizen complaint process. Anyone have a question in regards to citizen complaint process? Pastor Nelms.
In regards to the citizen complaint, especially when you're talking about community, and I know a lot of times we throw this phrase around, community policing, but it's still a top-down operation. It's still a oppressor-oppressed type relationship. And so when you're talking about policing and the community, how can the community, and I know you've talked about pastors and churches, and we got a number of pastors here who are pastoring over 100 people in that setting. How is it that the community can be more engaged and notified when you're dealing with the actions of the police? And that's from an accountability perspective. I know a lot of accountability wants to be done internally within the department, but I can be honest with you that, yeah, I'm the best husband in the city of Los Angeles based on my representation. My wife would probably tell you something totally different, okay? So how can we work in that mindset? How can the police understand what the community is seeing, and the community can be taken seriously and not just patted on the back like, yeah, we hear you. Next.
So I think that's a two-part question. Number one is, the expectation has to be that every deputy sheriff gets out there and engages in community policing, not the community affairs deputy, not the youth center deputy only, and then all the other ones are doing what they want, how they want to do it. So the expectation and the order, the procedure has to be established that everybody's out there engaging with the community. You know, I've seen a lot of community events, and I've participated in a lot of community events. And typically what you see is the community affairs individual and some of the administrative or command staff. You know, the captain or the lieutenant or somebody like that shows up so that they have a representation there from the department. And that's something that needs to change. We need to make it so that deputy sheriffs, number one, engage with the community. Number two, you know, I'm going to digress a little bit. You know, when I first came on, some guys told me, you know, some of the older guys there, they said, Eric, you know, being in a 365, 24/7 operation, they said, Eric, if you don't have somewhere to go and eat for Thanksgiving, Easter, or Christmas, when you're working, if you don't have somebody invite you into their home to feed you, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. And that is something I can say that we had. You know, we knew people in our neighborhood. We got out and we engaged. Many of us were from the neighborhood or connected to the neighborhood some way, shape, or form. That is something that has to change within the sheriff's department. You know, many times the personnel that are working neighborhoods have never even been there until they get assigned there. That's something that needs to change, you know, the assignment process. The second thing is, you know, for the community to be valid, we need to re-implement and make them consistent citizen academies. I think citizen academies are very important. They're hit and miss. Some stations do them, some don't. Some stations may have it for, you know, a year, do a couple of them, and then they don't do them for 4 or 5 years. I think with the Citizens Academy, it's a process in where citizens get a chance to come in and kind of go through some of the training that we go through, learn some of the things that we learn, do simulated traffic stops, you know, and kind of go through these different engagements where they can kind of really see what it's like when it's dark and there's low lighting and somebody's got on dark clothing and you don't know what they have. And an interesting thing enough is that you see some of the, matter of fact, some years ago, some clergy members went through it, and they said it was very eye-opening. It was a paradigm shift because you really get a chance to see what, you know, what a police officer sees. I think when we go through those type of academies and we engage in that manner, everybody builds credibility. And that way, and I mentioned it earlier, bringing in station-level oversight. You know, I would like for community members to be able to read a complaint and have some input on it. You know, you mentioned from the top down. You know, and again, as a reviewer, as a final reviewer sometimes on complaints, I'll just tell you this quick story. There was a lieutenant that submitted a complaint to me. And the gentleman's complaint was that he was put in the back seat of a patrol car for over 4.5 hours. He had to go to the bathroom. He told the deputies numerous times that he had to go to the restroom. They wouldn't let him out of the car. They didn't transport him anywhere, and so he ended up soiling himself in the backseat of the patrol car. So when I got this complaint, that was a interview, photos, and it's about a 5 or 6 page memo that describes what happened. This is what this lieutenant wrote. He wrote that he researched on WebMD that the adult male bladder can hold 180 whatever cc's of urine, and that a healthy adult can hold their urine for 8 to 10 hours, evidenced by when we sleep at night and we're not constantly getting up. He wrote all of this stuff and basically said, hey, the guy didn't really have to go to the bathroom on himself. He did it. Now, this is what he had the gall to submit to me. And basically, he said what the deputies did was not wrong. That is the problem. See, that is the problem because you have the lieutenant supporting and justifying some bad behavior by deputies. And that is part of the problem with the sheriff's department. We exist in this silo where you promote through the ranks and everything is in-house. And so the same culture, the same mindset is just regurgitated generation after generation. Needless to say, I can't repeat it. We're in the house of the Lord of what I said to this man about how dare he submit that. And we fixed it. You know, his attitude was, well, I thought I'm supposed to support the deputies. That's not supporting them. That's supporting stupidity. Right. And not to mention that this man was not even a suspect. You know, if he was a suspect, he should have long been transported to the station and booked. You know, so these are the kind of things that we need to pass from the very top down. What is acceptable? I would hate to see if I wasn't the one of the, and it actually wasn't me, it was my sergeant that caught it first and passed it on to me and said, can you believe this? So I have no doubt that may have passed at another station. That may have gone up the chain. I would like to think that somebody would have caught it. But that's one example of how we need, you know, citizens to get involved and be part of that review process so that if, for whatever reason, something like that does get by, hopefully we have some clergy and some citizens that can catch that and have some valid input on how to correct it.
What I'll do right now is I'm going to go ahead and let you ask the question, and then we'll close out with Eric just doing some closing remarks. So we'll go down the line, but Andre, we'll go ahead because you had a thought right there at what Eric was saying. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things, once you're elected, brother, I think you're going to have to deal with is just trust in the community. I just want to ask the audience, how many of you all trust the police? By show of hands. Only so 3, I believe, 3, 4. Okay. Same thing happened, Pastor Fisher happened to me. A few years ago, I was pulled over at gunpoint, ordered out of my truck. 2 cops had guns pointed at me on Manchester near Sepulveda. And long story short, I ended up leaving with not even a ticket. And I had to get out of the truck, walk backwards down the street, do the whole song and dance. And all they say at the end is, oh, sarcastically, was nice rims. And then they drive away. And if I had made a wrong move or said anything, I probably would have been dead. And Maxine Waters heard us talking about it on the radio. She came and got me and took me to the police commission and said, hey, does this look like people, your guys need to be pulling guns out and pointing guns at them and this, that, and the other, and they haven't done anything. How can you have guns pointed at you and you don't even get a ticket? And that happens all the time. And I think once you get in, Brother Strong, trust is going to be one of the main things you're going to have to deal with, because so many listeners, I've been answering that phone at KJLH for a long time, and people call and passionately say, you guys are our voice. And once they heard about that situation with me, they say, hey, you can talk about it on the radio, Andre, because you got a voice. So many of us, it happens to us every day, all day, and we can't even talk about it. Nobody listens to us. So trust is going to be your biggest issue. I just wanted to say that.
You know, Mr. Russell, you're absolutely right, and that is going to be one of the biggest things that I'm going to have to start rebuilding, you know, right away. And I will be the first to tell you here at law enforcement is number one is it starts with an apology, you know, and to say, you know, on behalf of law enforcement, I apologize for those experiences that you've had, you know, that have diminished that trust and caused us to lose that trust. And the second thing I have to say is I take full ownership of it. And when I say I mean law enforcement. We're the ones that have broken that trust, you know, and therefore we're the ones that have to rebuild it. The trust didn't get broken by itself. Law enforcement needs to do a lot to rebuild that trust. And it's not going to be something that goes overnight. And the only thing I'll say is, if you have the opportunity being that voice, is to ask the community, when you get somebody in office that truly wants to do it, give them a chance. Give them a chance, because it's going to take dialogue on both sides for us to build that trust. If there's only yelling and screaming and nobody's really listening, we're not going to get very far.
Yes, go ahead, Bishop.
It wasn't, you mean the lieutenant or the officer? The lieutenant was given what we call, it's called a performance log entry, a PLE, which basically, a write-up, yes, a write-up regarding it. And the officers, the deputies were counseled and talked to about that. Could it have gone further? I think had I seen a pattern of that, or if I see a pattern of that, I would absolutely, do something that calls for an investigation where you start talking about punitive stuff. But definitely write-ups.
So, to Brother Eric, so and then this just be my closing remarks. And again, I would love to meet with you and just
Absolutely.
talk further, because we're having some serious problems from the Compton sheriffs currently. And I love the new captain, Captain Clark. She's great. And I know a lot of them that's there, but we have issues, so I'd like to talk to you separate on that. But I want to say this. I think that what needs to happen, and this is the same thing that I would tell anyone, and the bishops and the pastors may agree with me on this. There was a pastor friend of mine that told everybody, we are going into the church on such and such and such and such date. But the board stood up and told him, no, you're not. And, it sounded good on Facebook Live, but in his contract and in the bylaws of that church, it said the only thing the pastor is to do is to preach and teach. Any other decisions are made from the trustee board and from the board of directors. Here's where I'm going with this, is that I feel like in order for anything to change, I think that it's going to have to be more than us holding these sessions every 5 minutes and everybody trying to make us feel sorry for the sheriff's department and what they're going through. I mean, I don't understand why y'all want us to feel sympathetic about it. It's like me feeling sorry for a beekeeper who gets stung by bees. Like, it is the career choice. We know it's dangerous. We do pray for you. But I think that we're going to have a hard discussion about the union, the Bill of Rights, and the things, the policies that are in place, such as your response saying, I'd have to see a pattern. That's put in place. That's a part of the order. All of it says something, I'm exaggerating here, like you got to see that happen 5 times before it becomes an issue. So anyone who's getting ready to be the new sheriff has got to make a promise to the community that you're going to attack and change and amend policy and legislation and rules that are protecting these people, or we will never see them disciplined and we will never see them fired, because I have yet to see anybody fired yet. I see them transferred, I see them changed, I see them disciplined, while a man literally has been degraded by peeing on himself. And that is an issue for me. So I just pray that if it is God's will that you are put in that space, because the sheriff in a meeting alluded to this, that there are some things he even wanted to change and do, but there are things in place that's been there since the 1800s that kind of make it hard for it to happen. So it could be a question on, are you going to go for the union? Are you going to be that guy that can stand up to the union? Are you going to handle the police union? That is one of the largest corrupt unions in the country, in the state of California, hands down. They have bought and paid for every single person that is in political rank right now. Without the police union, they do not win an election. Are you the guy that literally is going to stand up and change those rules and actually change the policies and rewrite the Bill of Rights so that the white counterparts that are in the sheriff's department can no longer hide behind these slave laws and regulations that have been in place since the late 1800s. I love you, though. I love you with the love of the Lord, and that's it. I'm done. I'm going to put the mic away and hope we can meet. Thank you.
Powerful, powerful question. First and foremost, there are numerous policies in place, and one of the things that I will say is this. With me, policies will be published so that you can see them and you can know when they're violated and when they're not and when they're within policy. So they will be published. That's part of that transparency model, so that we can't tell you they were within policy, but then you never get a chance to see the policy. The second thing is Bill of Rights, or POBAR, Police Officers' Bill of Rights. That's a legislative issue. That's not something that I can personally write and change and implement. What I can do is I can hold and make the determination for accountability within my department. In other words, the sheriff determines what we call the discipline schedule. You know, not everything deserves termination, but there are a lot of things that do deserve termination. And when they deserve it, that's when we implement it, and we implement it and we stand behind it. You know, I can say that we've had 4 sheriffs between 2014 and 2018. Baca was removed from office in February of 2014. We had interim John Scott for about 6 months. Then we had Jim McDonald get sworn in 2014 later, and then Villanueva took office in 2018. Where's the consistency there? I mean, everybody was all over the map, and everybody's trying to establish their message that they're trying to send in. Where I say that's important is because what's also very well known within the Sheriff's Department and not so much outside is the promotional process to the executive level within the Sheriff's Department. There isn't one. It is just a tap on the shoulder process, which is something that needs to change. So the reason that's relevant is because when you have a process that literally is not a process, it doesn't exist, and it's just a tap on the shoulder, what you have is you have probably 400 or 500 of your top leadership in the department that are going to say and do and act and deliver the message that the sheriff gives them. So if you have a sheriff that's not willing to discipline people and not willing to hold people accountable, nobody in their command staff is going to do it either, even when those discipline levels are within their purview. You know, not everything makes it to the sheriff. You know, certain things stop at the division chief level, certain things stop at a captain's level. But when you have the sheriff that says, hey, we're pretty much going to let everybody get away with everything, and that's the message, who's going to send something up the chain? So, you know, the environment that we have right now is one that's created that doesn't allow for dissenting ideas. It doesn't allow for somebody to speak up, because what we have is people trying to find their path to better living. With somebody like myself in the Sheriff's Department, with my internal affairs background, with my employment law background, I know what things can be done. I mean, I've tried civil service cases personally. I've been the reviewer of force, shooting, misconduct. And I can tell you, I can give it a very fair evaluation. You're absolutely right. I think that what we've shown and what we've demonstrated thus far has not been true accountability. And again, that's what I'm here to acknowledge, to admit, and to say that, yeah, it's got to change. And that's going to be, that's going to be tantamount to winning the trust of the community, and showing that we're holding people accountable. And that's absolutely my goal. And to go back to what you were saying before, you can call me anytime. I'll make sure that I take your call when you call. You know, I want the clergy to know, and I want the community to know, and I want you to have access to us, and not to run away from these hard conversations.
Thank you.
What else, Ray? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I got a quick follow-up on that. You know, when I took over a company as a CEO, and you know, one of the first things I wanted to share with my employees and my team was that this was my vision. And then there was the expectation, you know, set the expectation. And then there was accountability. And then the messaging was there, and how can we work together to do that. How can you implement that within the community, within the sheriff's department, to say, okay, here, I have accountability, this is the big vision, this is the expectation that you can expect, and know that as you see these are milestones that's going to happen as we talk about it moving forward?
So you're absolutely right. When you come into a position of leadership, you have to establish what your expectations are. And that comes through, again, dialogue. You know, it comes through training. You know, I want to just go back to, you know, what was said earlier by Pastor Fisher. You mentioned, you know, you have to see a pattern of it 5 times. You know, I give you this analogy. You know, if you let your kid eat in the bed, and then when they spill a bowl of cereal in the bed, you get mad at them for eating in the bed, you know, what kind of pattern have you set to say don't eat in the bed to begin with? So when it comes down to it, and you talk about if a deputy has been trained, if a deputy has been shown, if the leadership has told them it's okay to sit somebody in the back of the car for 4 hours, that's just the way we do things. There has to become a process where there's a new expectation. And there has to be, so we don't just jump up and fire them right then and there. We train them, we talk to them, we give them our expectations. And then next time they do it, now that's when we, you know, implement those disciplinary processes. So, you know, to what you're saying, you know, Ray, is dialogue. One of the very first things is the expectation speech. This is what is expected. This is what will be allowed. Our policies are already in place. Policies will be followed. And if you break the policy, you'll be held accountable. And that message, once again, has to go from the very top down. You know, traditionally what we see on the sheriff's department is deputies do something and we throw the book at them in a lot of instances. You know, captain, commander, chiefs do something and we push it to the side like, hey, let's hope nobody knows about this. So it's got to come from the very top down, and I have to put the right people in those places in order to hold that accountability. We have to change some processes. We have to change some policies. We got to get rid of these ambiguous policies that allow for subjective interpretation. You know, we got to make them a little bit more specific so it's objective. Is it reasonable, you know, for certain things? And it's going to be a process, but it's going to start immediately with the expectation. Once we establish the expectation, everybody knows what to do.
I know there are many other questions or subjects that we have for you, so we're going to come back and revisit it at another time for time's sake. But what I want to say to you tonight is, I want you to take 5 minutes to tell us why we should vote for you, and then after that, we're going to go get ready to close out. So here's your chance. Tell us why we as a community should go back to our neighborhoods, go back to our families, go back to our churches, and tell them to vote for Eric Strong.
Wow, 5 minutes. Ooh. You know, one thing I'd like to say is this. My entire career, I've tried to do the right thing. And one of my favorite sayings to everybody that I've trained, everybody I come in contact with is, do the right thing, not the popular thing. And the right thing is not always the popular thing, and the popular thing is not always the right thing. So you got to figure out which one you want to abide by. I've just been somebody that's about doing the right thing. You mentioned getting pulled over. You know, I remember a time driving down, you know, Hawthorne Boulevard in my truck and getting pulled over by deputies at my very own station when I worked Lennox Station. And they're so intent on doing, they come up and they're trying to open my car door and they're get out of the car. I want you to know I experience the same things you do. When I'm at work, I have the uniform on. When I take it off, I'm one of you driving down the street. I'm a black man driving down the street, and I've been subject. Now, I have the ability to diffuse it a little bit quicker because I can show my ID. I can say this is who I am. And I had to tell this guy, hey, if you stop for 5 seconds and look at me, you might recognize me. And his partner's over on the other side saying, hey, stop, cut it out. You know, but that's a demonstration to me of how they initiate these traffic stops. I see it, and that's not the only time. And I'm not the only one on the sheriff's department that's been subject to it. You know, I think the reason that you get behind me is because one is a lot of my family members, a lot of my cousins have been in and out of the prison system. I have a cousin that's been killed by law enforcement. I have family members that have been victims of serious crime. And why that's relevant and it's important is because I can relate to the kind of people that we come in contact with. And when I say the kind of people, we don't come in contact with people at birthday parties and anniversaries most of the time. Law enforcement comes in contact with people sometimes at the very worst moments of their life. My home has been burglarized. I know how I want to be treated when law enforcement shows up. I know how I want my family to be treated when law enforcement shows up. And honestly, that's the basic principle. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just as simple as everything that we need to be successful in this profession, you know, we learned at a very young age. Say please, say thank you, and say you're sorry when you're supposed to. It's just about respect, compassion, and just common courtesy to every single person that we come in contact with. So that is going to be my absolute. I mean, I can talk about the policies, I can talk about force, I can talk about community input and community engagement and youth programs, but the basic principle is it will be absolutely necessary and absolutely imperative that every single contact a person is treated with respect, kindness, and consideration. And I'm going to close with this story real quick. It's happened to me twice in my career, but many, many years ago, I was coming out of the Price Club on Century Boulevard, Price Club, that's how long ago it was, Costco. Coming out of there with my young son in a basket, in a cart, and a guy stops me as I'm exiting, and he asked me, he says, "Hey, are you a police officer?" I'm in civilian clothes, you know, coming out of there, and I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, is your last name Strong?" I said, "Well, yes, it is." And he starts to tell me that I took him to jail one time. Now, he recognizes me, I don't recognize him. And I got my young son with me, he's probably less than 2 years old. So I'm starting to have these red flags going up like, uh-oh, you know, what's going on? And he tells me, and I'll put it in softer words, he says, "You took me to jail when I didn't want to go to jail," and he basically told me that I put it on him and I put the handcuffs on him. And so now my flags are going up again like, oh my gosh, I'm putting my cart behind me, I'm looking around, you know, figuring out how am I going to protect my son. And he sees what I'm doing, he says, "Hold on, that's not what I'm about." He says, "You're the only police officer that I've ever," he says, "I've been involved in, you know, lots of arrests and lots of incidents." He says, "My whole life been about crime." He says, "But when the fight was over, you picked me up, you dusted off my pants, and you asked me if I was okay." He said, "You're the first police officer that's ever done that." And that's sad that I'm the first police officer that's ever done that if he's had this many run-ins with the law. That should be the expectation of every police officer, and that's what I was taught by my father, who was a police officer. You know, it doesn't matter what we have to go to. Sometimes this law enforcement, you know, game is a dirty game. Sometimes we got to, you know, you run into a school shooting, you run into a store, you run into a movie theater where there's a shooting. You know, every moment that you run in there, you're stopping that assailant from shooting somebody else. You're taking those seconds of attention from another assailant. So I said it's a dirty game, and a lot of times bad people don't want to go to jail. They really don't. But that doesn't mean they have to be disrespected. And that's my main message. It really is. It doesn't matter what you do, where you police, if I'm in, you know, policing Tina Marie's house up above the Rose Bowl, or if I'm in Compton at Southside Park. We can police people with respect and compassion and dignity no matter where we are. And that's the message that I'm leaving with, and that's why I think you should vote for me.
All right, well, we definitely look forward to further discussing other topics with you at a later date. I didn't want to close out without giving anyone the opportunity to ask you a question. So will you be around a few minutes afterwards?
You said there's food, right?
Yes, there is food.
I'll be around.
All right, did anyone else on the panel have anything they wanted to say tonight as we're closing out?
You left us on such a high note, I don't want to bring us down, but I am really deeply passionate. I've had a chance to work with you, I've had a chance to work with your wife, and I think one of the carryovers, we have the civil grand jury, the criminal grand jury, the Office of Inspector General, we've got the Oversight Commission, but we've not done anything with the Brady list and the gangs. And I think that's going to be important for for the community that those are so important to us, the gangs, and even the gang mindset, and the gangs and the Brady list. And I think with all of those entities and your passion and your purpose, then we should see, something happen with that list of officers that have already been identified as less than fit to, to serve and hold a gun and command our communities. I think that would be really, really cool if we could move forward with that and have some additional, because the conversation just kind of stopped, so.
Okay. Definitely, we will.
Just real quick, kind of piggybacking off of what's already been said tonight, you're going into a system, and systems have to be broken and sometimes destroyed and rebuilt. This is a system that's been around a long time. As Pastor Fisher stated, this stuff has been in place, and so we've got to do the dismantling. And just understand that as clergy and as pastors, we wield a lot of power. And I would ask you to use that not for your own self-grandizement, but use it for what we do, which is we are community engagers. And if we can get in a room and hammer it out, and we can trust that we're walking out of there not getting cajoled, but actually heard, then that can go a long way when we step out into our respective communities and churches. And so use that to your advantage, but don't use it to abuse it so that you can keep your power, but use it so that the people can ultimately have the power.
All right. Well, with that being said, I'm going to ask Cedra Strong to stand up because we know behind every good man is a great woman. So Cedra, go ahead and stand up. Cedra Strong. And when is the election?
The election is June of 2022. A
June.
little less than 10 months away now.
Okay.
More than
All
10
right. All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to get ready to close out tonight. I do want to say this. If you want to donate to Vote for Strong for Sheriff, we do have that link for you or access for you to do so. So we want you to see CC or Cedra Strong afterwards so that you can do that. It takes funds to run. He didn't come here tonight seeking funds or anything like that. But I feel like this. If you want to get behind him and want to stand behind him, we got to put our money in it. Amen? All right. So let's do the right thing tonight. And those that would like to do so, see CC afterwards. And with that being said, we do have food for you tonight. We're going to go ahead and close out. We want to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight. Let's give our panelists a hand. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We want to give Bonita Entertainment a hand. We want you to go on your Roku and download Bonita Entertainment streaming TV so that you'll have access. We're going to upload this show on there, and you'll be able to watch it in full. And email me any questions you have to Tamla Help Me to Health @gmail.com. And we will also be on the KJLH website. So look for those links on KJLH 102.3. And with that being said, I'm going to ask Pastor Fisher if he would close us out really quick. And like I said, food is in the back. We have Roland from Sultan energy drinks here, all natural energy drinks that are made with black seed oil. How many know the benefits of black seed oil? All right, so these are all natural energy drinks, and we have some for all of you. I don't know if you want to drink it tonight, but go back and get you a drink. And we have PJ tacos here tonight, so please enjoy the food, enjoy the drinks, and thank you for coming out.
Lord, we thank you for all that we have seen and we have heard. Please bless the food for the nourishment of our bodies. Help us get home safe, and let your will be done in this election. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.